Okay, we'll make a start if that's good for everybody. Thank you for joining us. Really nice to see you this afternoon for this Teacher Development Network live event. We wanted to really focus in today on the new guidance that's come out from the Department for Education around setting up early career teacher induction. You'll be really pleased to know it's a much improved system and process compared to last year. We said from day one really of being a teaching school hub offering these programs that we felt the processes were overly complex, too much duplication of data sharing and data entry, but there was nothing we could do. But we produced a nice guide to try and guide people through the processes of getting ECF training set up, appointing an appropriate body, and of course reviewing the statutory entitlement. So what we're going to show you today, or provide you with an overview of, are the processes for 2022-23 registrations for setting up early career teacher induction. Bit of a tough gig, this one this afternoon, just in terms of the audience. Nothing personal against anybody, but we've got people on the call who are really experienced in setting up early career teacher induction, but we will also have people who are very new to this, who are doing it for the first time under this new 2-year induction model that we've had since September 2021. We'll have people who are familiar with the 2021-22 process, but not familiar with this new process the department have introduced. So what we're going to try to do, Emma and I, is to pitch this in a way that we're catering for everybody. So do bear with us if there's a little bit of the information you're already familiar with. We're just trying to meet everybody's needs. You may have seen this graphic on our social media over the last few weeks. We're just trying to emphasize the point that induction consists of 3 things. So the first thing is early career framework based training, and you have 3 options as we'll explore around providing early career framework based training. You have to appoint an appropriate body to quality assure the induction for the early career teacher. And of course, you have to provide the statutory entitlement as outlined in the DFE documentation. Last year, despite the messages that we tried to communicate, a good number of schools didn't understand that requirement to register with an appropriate body. They felt because they'd registered with the early career framework-based training providers that aspect was covered off, whereas actually they're 2 very separate processes. And I think that's part of the department's learning this year. They've met with us as teaching school hubs on a regular basis. We've provided them with the guidance and feedback around the process last year, and I think this year that they've got it right in terms of the communications around these requirements. But just to reiterate, 3 elements. Unless you have all 3 elements in place, induction hasn't commenced. And in fact, induction can't commence unless the early career teacher is registered with an appropriate body. So there's 3 roles and responsibilities that we want to talk about this afternoon. So I'm going to hand over to Emma just to give the overview of these 3 key roles within induction.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Emma Dobson and I work closely with Paul on the implementation of the Early Career Teacher Programme. I'm just going to talk you through the roles and responsibilities of 3 key people in the Early Career Framework, and that's your induction coordinator or tutor, mentor and early career teacher. And Paul said earlier there are 3, in terms of the Early Career Framework based training, there are 3 options that you can choose. Regardless of which option you choose to implement programme wise, these 3 roles, then the responsibilities are very, very much the same. So I thought I'd just go through in terms of exemplifying what they mean in terms of the statutory guidance. So if we start with the induction coordinator tutor, Paul, if that's okay. Next slide. Fabulous. So all schools have to nominate an induction tutor to be a point of contact with the DFE portal, and that particular member of staff is given access to the DFE managed training for early career teacher service. So that's sort of the new process that you use to register, that I know Paul is going to go into a lot more detail about further in this session. Your school's induction tutor is responsible for the monitoring and support of your early career teachers, and they also manage the processes and review and coordinate formal assessments. Ideally, your induction tutor will not be a mentor as well at the same time, and this is because the 2 roles are very, very distinct, as you'll see here. So I've just put out here in bullet points what it states in the statutory guidance from the DFE what those roles actually, what an induction tutor should actually hold in terms of qualification, and also what is expected of them. I think it's important to point out as well that many induction tutors are senior leaders. So I'll just give you a couple of seconds to glance over those main bullet points there. So aside from the assessment, the formal assessment aspects of this that are linked strongly with the appropriate body, each school's induction coordinator, and another main responsibility of theirs is to oversee and support mentors and the ECTs in getting the most out of the training programme that you decide to sign up to, and make sure that it's embedded very successfully in your school. Okay, Paul, I think we're okay to move on to mentors. Thank you. So as I said before, the mentor and the induction tutor are two very discrete roles with distinctly different responsibilities, and it's expected that they should be held by different individuals. However, the DfE do state in their guidance that in exceptional circumstances, if the head teacher does decide to designate one person, a single teacher, to fulfill those both roles, it's really important that they're very clear on how these roles are very different, and they understand that the mentor is offering support against the training program, and that it doesn't become sort of muddy waters and merged with it becoming an assessment tool, because it really isn't an assessment tool. So I'll just give you a couple of seconds to read. Oh, just go back one, Paul, if you don't mind. Just a couple of seconds to read over those sort of what the responsibilities include there. And I just thought I'd read to you as well what is stated explicitly in the statutory guidance, that mentoring is a very important element of the induction process, and the mentor is expected to be given adequate time to carry out the role effectively and to meet the needs of the ECT. And this includes attending regular mentor sessions and mentor training where appropriate. And there is funding provided for that, and this is what the DfE explicitly does have in black and white in their statutory guidance. Thanks, Paul. If we go on to the ECT, if that's okay. And then finally, the important person in all of this is the early career teacher. So they are entitled, and it's a mandatory entitlement to a 2-year programme of training and mentor support as part of their induction. And this package of training and support is known as the early career frame based training, because it's based on the early career framework. So as part of their entitlement, we've got their 4 bullet points as to what they are entitled to, and what your induction tutor will oversee and make sure does happen. I think we'd like to point out as well, because there has been some sort of confusion in the system this year of what an early career teacher is as opposed to an NQT. So if you see sort of the very bottom 2 bullet points that we'd like to draw your attention to, is that an early career teacher, their induction, if their induction commenced on or after the 1st of September 2021, then they are entitled to this 2-year induction package, whereas we still do have, Paul and I were discussing this recently, quite a few NQTs of old in the system, and those teachers, their induction commenced before the 1st of September 2021, but they have still got until next academic year to complete what would have been the old 1-year induction programme. So just be very clear when you are appointing an early career teacher that they are an early career teacher and not an NQT. And I think just one more thing I'd like to add on here, which I think is really important, as stated in the statutory guidance, is that ECTs cannot fail their early career framework based training. It's an entitlement of support. It's very different to the assessment. So I'll hand over back to you, Paul.
Thanks, Emma. So I think what's really important to just bear in mind as we go through these next few slides is that the induction tutor, sometimes referred to as an induction coordinator, is really crucial, because it's the induction tutor who's going to lead this process of getting ECF based training set up for your school. The mentor is going to provide the day-to-day support to your ECT, but it's the induction tutor who's overseeing this for the school. So as you start looking at the DfE guidance, you'll be presented with 3 options around how to access ECF based training. Now, 96% of schools nationally this year have selected to use one of the DFE funded national providers, like Ambition Institute, that we work really closely with, because that's the option that gives you the maximum amount of support. It's also giving you the maximum amount of national funding into your school to fund the provision of this offer. Your second option is to use DFE accredited materials to deliver your own programme. So this last year was referred to as the core induction programme, opposed to option one that I've just mentioned, which was the full induction programme. Some of that terminology seems to have disappeared a little bit this year, but basically you can use some of the materials that were developed during the early rollout, and you can complement them with your own training and development of the mentor, and run with that. But what's really important to flag up here is that means as a school you will receive less DFE funding. There'll be a lot more workload for you to take forward, and your curriculum plans for this ECF based training that you develop has to go through a fidelity checking process with the appropriate body. So the appropriate body has to give you the green light to say your plans are fit for purpose. So it's a much more significant piece of work for you as a school. The third option is to totally design everything yourself. But as you can imagine, that brings even less funding from the Department for Education, and you have much more extensive fidelity checks to go through, and that's going to be running into probably several £1000s in terms of cost to your school for going through that fidelity checking process. So as I say, 96% of schools tend to go for the DFE funded provider option that you're presented as you go through this new process. Just to unpick that a little bit further, as I've mentioned, we deliver the training and support for ECTs and mentors for schools that choose the user DFE funded provider option. So we're charged as a teaching school hub of supporting all 215 Bradford schools, but we also work with our wider partners beyond the city. If you opt to work with us, then you choose Ambition Institute as your lead provider during the setup process that I'll describe in a few minutes' time, and you'd also choose Exceed Teaching School Hub as your delivery partner. Okay, so what I want to try and do then is just to guide you through these steps one at a time. Do you know what's pertinent now? What might you come to once you've appointed an ECT into your school, if you appoint an ECT into your school for September? All schools have an action to undertake now, and this is going to be an annual exercise that you'll be asked to engage with, and this should have been communicated to you via an email from the Department for Education a couple of weeks ago. So the first step of the DFE step-by-step guide, which you can access via the link I've included at the bottom of this screen, but also via our website, of course, so www.teachingschoolhub.co.uk/induction. The first step is to tell the Department for Education whether you expect to appoint an early career teacher this year or not. If you decide that you're not going to appoint one later in the year, having told the department that you were going to appoint one, that's no problem. You're now able to log on to this system and to change that information. So this new portal is putting the control in schools' hands. You're able to maintain and update your records through a relatively straightforward and simple process. Much easier than all the rigmarole we had to go through last year to make changes to delivery. So all schools, tell the department whether you think you're going to appoint an ECT or not. If circumstances change, go back onto the portal and change the information. If you choose that you're not going to appoint an ECT, the department will stop pestering you with emails until you go back on to say you are appointing one. Once you have appointed an ECT, you then have to follow the remaining steps. So steps 2 to 6 of the DFE step-by-step guide that we've mentioned. So the first thing to do is to choose or to change your school's induction tutor. If your induction tutor is already registered with the Department for Education because you're accessing ECF-based training this year, then their records are probably accurate and up to date. And that person, using their email address, can log on to the portal to make any amendments or to add ECTs, as we'll describe. But equally, if your induction tutor has changed, you as a school can make those changes on that system so that the records with the department are up to date. So again, the department knows who your induction tutor is and who they need to be communicating with. The third step then will be to choose how you want to run your ECF based training. So are you going to use a DFE funded provider, working with Ambition Institute and Exceed Teaching School Hub, for example, or are you going to design and deliver your own program or use some of the national materials? Question 3 is asking you what you're going to do. If you choose to say, yes, I'm going with to use a DFE funded provider, as most schools do, then it'll ask you, well, who do you want to be working with then? So again, that's the point where your local provider would be Exceed Teaching School Hub, working in partnership with Ambition Institute. So Ambition as the lead provider, Exceed as the delivery partner. You may also need to register here if you chose not to be using a DFE funded provider. You need to tell the department which materials you're going to be using. So you're going to be using the ones that were created by EDT, Ambition, Teach First, or the other provider whose name's getting away from me. Best practice. Thank you very much. Thanks, Emma. So you just indicate on the portal which of those resources you'd be using. The 5th step is to register your ECTs and your mentors. So you'd add their names and their details. So again, the department knows who they're going to be funding. And then finally, step number 6 is to begin the training. So that would be about your early career teacher and new mentors. So just bear in mind that the mentor training isn't something that's repeated indefinitely. Your mentor will go through that program once, and once they're trained, you've built the capacity. That's why it's really important that mentors don't change during the training. Ideally, you keep the one person for the 2 years of induction, and the DFE are going to be reinforcing that message this year. So from the look of it, pretty straightforward process. Having looked at the portal and had a demonstration of it ourselves, we think it looks pretty good too. So fingers crossed, all the complexities we had in previous years have gone away. We're getting lots of questions about what about existing ECTs? Do they need to be registered on here? What about mentors? There's no action needed. So when you log on to this portal, if you've already got an ECT in your school, all their details should already be there, as should the mentor. So what you'll find are there are a couple of tabs within the system referring to different academic years, the current academic year and next year. So you should be able to manage your records yourselves now for current ECTs and mentors. Much more simple. What the department are trying to do here is reduce data duplication. Last year you had to share the same information multiple times with us, with Ambition, with the Department for Education, just complex. This year, the Department for Education are gathering the information and they will pass it to the lead provider, Ambition Institute in our case, and Ambition Institute will share it with us as a teaching school hub delivering that training. So you should only need to put information into the system once. There may be some additional questions that come from Ambition or ourselves later down the line, because there's some information we need, like which year group is the early career teacher teaching in, so that we can then, in preparing our clinics and conferences, make sure that they're matched to the best group that's going to support their development most effectively. So minimal data, well, no data duplication and minimal numbers of times being asked to share information. I'm going to pass over to Emma now, because I've mentioned our partnership with Ambition Institute. If you're not familiar with our Early Career Teachers programme, we thought it'd be useful just to give you a brief, broad overview of what it entails. Thanks, Emma.
Thanks, Paul. So as Paul said, we're delivery partners with lead provider, Ambition Institute, to deliver the programme, which is the DFE fully funded package, which the majority, as you could see on the previous screens, schools across the sector have actually gone with. So I thought this would be a really good opportunity to give you a broad overview of the curriculum and content and what you can expect if you do sign up for an ECF based training programme that's DFE funded. So from our perspective with Ambition, the curriculum looks like this in terms of engagement. It takes place over 2 years, and I think it's really important to note it's the twin development training programme for both ECTs and mentors. So there are expectations on both parts there. So for the expectation for ECTs, and it is mandatory, is that they attend 3 full-day in-person conferences. Now, given that we've been in a pandemic, that hasn't happened this year, but delighted to say moving forward, conferences are going to be in person. And also that ECTs attend 6 clinics over the 2-year period, and also access self-directed online study modules on a weekly basis and engage with instructional coaching. And then equally, mentors are expected to engage with two in-person conferences to sort of help them fulfill their role and really understand instructional coaching and how to best mentor, and then 3 clinics over the 2 years, which take place virtually and last 1 hour. Okay, do you want to go to the next slide, please, Paul? Thank you. So in terms of the curriculum content, it's the Early Career Teacher programme that we deliver in partnership with Ambition is split into 3 strands, and that is a behaviour, instruction and subject. So, and each of those are split into 12 modules and are accessed over the 2-year induction period. And we particularly felt quite positive about this in terms of it allowed flexibility for purposeful pauses within the programme. So although there are 12 modules that are released in term 1 that focus on behaviour, it isn't solely behaviour management. It looks at behaviour for learning and goes into more depth in terms of environment, etc. But the expectation, we said again, is weekly engagement. But if, for example, there is an assessment week in your school, in your setting, there's residentials or other in-house CPD that you wish your ECTs to get involved with, then they still can access modules that haven't been accessed in that half term, for example, in year 2. And then similarly with instruction, that looks at pedagogy, and then subject that looks at curriculum. So these weekly online study modules are then also supported and supplemented with instructional coaching from a mentor, which I'll go into a little bit more detail shortly. But again, just in terms of the content here, in every strand, the modules build upon one another in their complexity, so they have to be completed in chronological order. So as a mentor or ECT or induction lead, you wouldn't be looking at the curriculum and think, oh, my ECT really could do with sort of looking at module 8, that's an area of development for them now. That's not the principle of the curriculum. It is progressive, interlinked and built upon, so they are accessed sequentially in chronological order. Are we okay to go to the next slide, please, Paul? And just here, a brief overview of the curriculum design, really, and that, you know, it is very well considered and crafted and built upon a real strong evidence base around the science of learning. And what we found with both mentors and ECTs, it really has upskilled their understanding of cognitive science and the theory of learning. And those principles are equally what underpin the design of this curriculum and the delivery of it, that, you know, we learn best and change habits when learning is broken down into small manageable chunks, that there's lots of opportunity for retrieval, and things are revisited frequently throughout the curriculum. And again, the ECTs are provided with clear models of what good look like, and that does happen within their study modules, but also from their mentors and their induction tutors. Next slide, please, Paul. So we thought we'd give you a brief overview of what a typical weekly engagement for an ECT would look like. So the commitment that we expect on the programme from an early career teacher is to complete self-study modules and implement action steps in their weekly coaching meetings. So 2 things they have to do each week in ECT is to complete a self-study module, and that includes them watching a short video, reading an evidence summary, and then completing a quiz, which sort of is retrieval of the knowledge that they have just engaged with. And then the second part is a 45-minute instructional coaching session that they would access from their mentor. And this really does serve to close the knowing doing gap. So what they've studied, that evidence base, that theory, through instructional coaching and effective mentoring, they are then putting those principles into practice in their classrooms and seeing expert models of what that can and should look like, along with multiple opportunities to practice that until it sort of changes habits and becomes embedded in their day-to-day pedagogy. Thanks, Paul. And then finally, we thought we'd just share with you what the expectations are for mentors. And again, this really does sort of endorse what the statutory guidance stipulates, that ECTs are receiving effective mentoring and coaching on a weekly basis. So a mentor would be fully trained through the conferences and clinics that I mentioned at the beginning of this section. And it would take around 45 minutes, but before that, there is an optional aspect for mentors to look at the study, a study summary that the ECTs have engaged with that week, so that you're abreast of that. That is optional. A lot of our mentors actually do or have that conversation with their ECTs. And then a mentor would undertake a 15-minute observation on a specific action step, and would have the learning platform that is used throughout this programme, which is StepLab, to actually mark off against a set success criteria whether the ECT is meeting that action step or not. And then not necessarily within that same day, it can be within that week. A 45-minute instructional coaching session does take place, where feedback, very thorough feedback, is given, where they unpick what went well, review what went well in the observation, but then a new action step has been set. And that is the meat of this session, really, where ECTs are really exposed to expert models of what good looks like for their new action step. And it is modelled by the mentor, by video footage, and then they get opportunities to practice that within the coaching session, and then also obviously back in their classrooms. And then the following week, that action step is observed by the mentor again and reviewed, and so on as the cycle goes. We will be giving a lot more detail around sort of the curriculum coverage and overview as we get further into this academic year, nearer summer, as ECT appointments are I guess ever increasing. But we just thought we'd give you a very brief whistle-stop tour of what the curriculum involves if you do opt for the DFE funded ECF-based training.
Thanks, Emma. So that's a very broad overview of the recruitment process, and I shared with you via the previous slide the link there to go on to the Manage My ECT training portal with the Department for Education. Our website, teachingschoolhub.co.uk/induction, provides you with quick links to all of those resources, and we've also been able to enhance some of the messaging there as well, just to help you to take the necessary steps. So do use our website /induction, that web page, as your main reference point for taking induction forward. I think you'll find it really, really helpful, and there's some extra resources on there that I'll mention. So one of the bigger challenges last year was making sure that all schools had appointed an appropriate body. As I've mentioned before, induction can't commence until an appropriate body has been appointed. The department would really encourage you to appoint an appropriate body before the start of the next academic year, but we also appreciate the fact that recruitment might roll into the next academic year, but so it may be a little bit later. But don't just wait to get your ECT up and running with ECF-based training before you then think about appointing an appropriate body. You do need to take that action almost simultaneously, really. Fidelity checks, obviously, if you're going down the road of using DFE accredited materials to design your own program or designing your own, then also bear in mind that your appropriate body is going to need a long lead time, really, in terms of getting their heads around those offers before they can be signed off and approved. And of course, that's delaying induction as well. You do need to appoint an appropriate body. Exceed Teaching School Hub offers this service, and we've had, I was looking at data this morning, I think it was 187 early career teachers through us this year, with charges starting at £40 per early career teacher per term. That's where you can find out more information about our offer, /AB, added to our website address. Existing users can just continue to use ECT Manager. New schools can register themselves via that link on the page. The final part of the entitlement that we've been talking about is the statutory entitlement as set out by the Department for Education. So, that's covering some of the guidance that Emma's already spoken about. So that 10% reduction in timetable in year 1 and 5% reduction in year 2, being able to observe more experienced teachers and the ECF-based training and so on. it's really important that the induction tutor finds some time just to read through that document, and there are aspects of it that need to be disseminated to the head teacher if they're not the induction tutor, to governors, to mentors, to the ECT themselves as well. So really great reference point. It's got the answers to lots of your questions and queries, so a must read. I think my other bit of guidance for induction tutor, would be to also spend some time looking through this new DFE process. So, as a head teacher, if you could make sure your induction tutor has half an hour to an hour. It took me about half an hour, I've got to say, just to read through all the new guidance. It suddenly starts making sense, and it feels a lot less complicated than it's perhaps felt in the past. So again, teacherschoolhub.co.uk/induction will guide you through everything you need to do. What I've also created over the last couple of days is a frequently asked questions webpage, and this is full of rich content for you now. So I've tried to cover off questions and queries around registration, entitlement, if you're working in FE, for example, but also really trying to clarify what funding schools are entitled to and how you receive that, because it doesn't come through into your budget as being marked for ECTs. That's just not the case. So again, teacherschoolhub.co.uk/induction FAQs. You'll find all that information and guidance there. So a quick read, but some really helpful, useful reference points there. Okay, so in terms of setting up ECT induction, there are headline messages. And as I say, I'm tired of saying it, I think teacherschoolhub.co.uk/induction is going to be your reference point for taking steps forward. Some immediate steps in terms of letting the department know whether you're expecting to appoint an ECT or not. And once you've appointed one, then following the remainder of steps 2 to 6 to get everything set up for induction would be really a wise step. Also, just be aware the Department for Education will contact the induction tutor again later in the year to ask which appropriate body they've been registered with as well. So they're just trying to make sure that, unlike last year, making sure that doesn't get missed. So the final thing I wanted to mention today before I open the floor to any questions is that we have opened a window yesterday for appointing facilitators for our early career framework based training and national professional qualifications. So if you're a school that works in partnership with us, or you're going to be accessing the ECF or MPQs through us going forward, would welcome colleagues expressing an interest and then applying to become a visiting fellow, the term we use for our facilitators. We can't guarantee deployments. It's a little bit like the SLE and local leader of education designations in the past, but those people who are in our pool will be the people we turn to when we have capacity. Using visiting fellows is always dependent on the number of people coming through the programme, so we don't know how we're going to use facilitators until recruitment is well underway and how many facilitators we need. So we've designed a fairly straightforward process, very similar to what we did for SLEs. So we ask them to express an interest via our webpage. So it's just giving us their name, their school, and saying, I'm thinking about being a visiting fellow for the new national professional qualification for early years leadership, for example. And then they can work on preparing their application. And there are a couple of deadlines published on our website that we're working to for window 1. We will ask for a head teacher reference, but it's very tick box. We want the head teacher just to say, yes, this person has experience of being a teacher educator or a senior leader or a whole range of questions, but it's tick box. So very quick and easy for head teachers to fill in. And then we'll hold an informal 20 to 30 minute meeting with the applicants that we shortlist to try and confirm them as coming on board and joining our pool. They will then access training. Fortunately, the training is not funded, but again, on that webpage, we have published dates that that training is available. So we don't have SLEs and LLE designations anymore. We're hoping that this will help to fill that gap and really welcome those applications from schools that work with us locally and further afield. Just to flag up, there are more big announcements coming next week. And then finally, just to open the floor, if there's any questions or comments from colleagues. We're a small group, so please feel free to just unmute and ask your question.
Hi, Paul. I've got a quick question.
Hi, Anne.
Hiya. We obviously used you as our appropriate body last year. Do I need to go on to ECT Manager and do something to say we'd like to do that again, or is that just a given?
No, there's nothing you need to do. If an ECT is set up for a 2-year induction program, then they'll naturally continue unless at the end of their next assessment you say they're leaving your employment, then they'll drop away from the system. It's a great question because I asked ECT Manager that very question this morning, so I'm glad I did, and I'm talking with confidence there. So yeah, no action necessary. It'd just be registering new ECTs.
Okay, so and I can do that on ECT Manager.
You can.
Using the perfect.
Great, thank you. Any further questions? I'm delighted we've had one question. We don't normally get very many at this point. So
Paul, another question then.
Great.
We're getting an ECT2.
Yeah.
Do I do that on ECT Manager as well? Just register them as ECT2.
Yeah, absolutely. Just register them on there, and what it should do is it will tell us who the previous appropriate body was, and we'll either receive their documentation automatically or we'll reach out to that appropriate body to pick that up. So yeah, just register them as normal. You will need to go onto the new DFE portal and register them on there, and they should come up as saying actually they've started a program already. Do you know, is this the same person, and do you want them to stick on the same program or to change depending on the circumstances? So again, the portal should help you to have a smooth transition of that ECT.
Right, cool.
There is some information on our frequently asked questions page as well in regards to that. Okay, any final questions? Purposeful pause.
I daren't ask another
Go
one.
on, Anne.
Go for it.
You're on the payroll now.
I know. How do you know if you're already registered as a visiting fellow?
You are, Anne.
Thank you, Emma. That was exactly the answer I needed from you. That's great. I'll take that one. Thanks, Emma. No more questions, honestly. No more, Paul.
Okay. So unless somebody interrupts me now, I'll say our thank yous. Really appreciate everybody's time this afternoon. Hopefully that's been useful. As Emma says, we'll try to become increasingly specific with the information that we share with you going forward. But today we just felt, because we're quite early in that cycle, just giving you the headlines of what needs to happen would be helpful, and an introduction to the content if you're not familiar with it. But our website /induction, that page will really guide you through everything you need to be doing. So good luck, and you know where we are if we can answer any questions or queries along the way. Thank you.